Good afternoon. The one person that was not introduced standing up front is Detective Clint Cole, who is our unsolved cold case detective, and I wanted to introduce him myself. I also have several members of my staff that are, excuse me, out in the audience. So my name is Sheriff Ian Parkinson. I'm joined here, obviously, by the president of Cal Poly, Jeff Armstrong. I want to begin today, or we're beginning here today, because this is where it all began on the campus of Cal Poly University. On May 25th, 1996, this was the last place that Kristin Smart was seen alive. It has been 24, almost 25 years since Kristin went missing. 24 years without a resolution until today. I'm here this afternoon to announce the arrest
we seem to have some technical issues with the audio here. However, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriffs are holding a press conference in regards to the disappearance.
Approximately 2 a.m. near the intersection of Perimeter and Grand Avenue, which is right over my left shoulder, as she walked home from an off-campus party. Kristin was last seen with Paul Flores, also a 19-year-old freshman that walked her home from the party. Kristin never returned to her dorm room that night and has not been seen or heard from since that time. She was reported missing to the Cal Poly Police Department on May 28, 1996. Cal Poly Police handled the initial investigation into her disappearance with the assistance of investigators from the San Luis Obispo County District Attorney's Office. On June 26, 1996, about a month later, the San Luis Sheriff's Office assumed the lead investigation in the case. We have actively investigated the case since that time. We have received assistance from the FBI, California Department of Justice, numerous other law enforcement agencies throughout the state of California and actually out of the state of California. I introduced Detective Cole for a reason. About 4 years ago, the Board of Supervisors, and I think the chair of the board, Lynn Compton, is here, granted a request that I had for a unsolved cold case detective. Many of our cold cases are actually assigned to our detectives in addition to their normal caseload, and Kristin's was one of those cases. Kristin's was one of the cases that I targeted for this position, and after granting that position, Detective Cole assumed that position and has been working on Kristin's case since then. Throughout our investigation, Paul Flores has remained a person of significant interest. There's been some discussion of what is a person of interest versus a suspect, and it's really a matter of terminology. When a crime occurs, everybody involved in that area could be a person of interest until they're ruled no longer of interest, either through alibi, through witness, through physical evidence. But Paul remained as a person of interest, and as the case progressed, became a suspect and the prime suspect in the case. So I became sheriff in 2011 and did a complete and requested a complete review of all the physical evidence that had ever been taken in the missing person case. In late 2016, we discovered additional evidence that confirmed that Paul was the suspect in the disappearance. In 2019, we interviewed several witnesses that had not been previously interviewed, and I'll say some of that information came to light through the podcast that many of you are familiar with, that was produced and eventually led to our interviewing that witness. And with the knowledge of the discovered of new evidence, new witnesses, sheriff's detectives secured a court order authorizing the interception and monitoring of Paul Flores' cell phone and text messages. This is one of many things that have been done over the last 10 years. In February of 2020, detectives served search warrants at the home of Paul Flores, as well as his sister, mother, and father, all simultaneously last year. Physical evidence recovered during these searches led to the service of additional search warrant at Paul Flores' residence in April of last year. During the search warrant, detectives recovered evidence related to the murder of Kristin Smart. In March of this year, detectives served another search warrant in Arroyo Grande at the home of Ruben Flores, the father of Paul Flores. Additional evidence related to the Smart investigation was discovered at that time. So as a result of this evidence, a San Luis Obispo Superior Court judge signed 2 arrest warrants and 2 additional search warrants. At approximately 07:30 this morning, today, both were arrested simultaneously with a team down in San Pedro, California, and a team in Arroyo Grande, California, and they arrested Paul Flores and his father, Ruben. Paul was arrested for charge of murder with 0 bail, meaning he is unable to bail, and Ruben Flores was arrested as an accessory to murder with a bail of $250,000. We are still currently in the process of executing those search warrants. Could be there for the remainder of the day or even into tomorrow, depending on what they find. Now, I understand a lot of people want to know what we found in the detail, and that's kind of the question that people continuously ask us and ask me is, what exactly did you find and what exactly do they have that has led to this? Well, I can tell you, unfortunately, the search warrants were sealed, which means I cannot discuss what evidence was found, and probably more importantly is that we have a due process right now, and everybody here is allowed that due process right. That means it has to go to court. There has to be a trial of 12 people and decide his guilt or innocence. So discussing specific items of evidence is just not appropriate at this point. I will say this, and this is probably a question that I will answer at this point, that we have not recovered Kristin. We will continue to focus on finding her remains regardless of any court action. So we will continue the process of finding out where Kristin is. We know that's an important part or important issue with the family. When I took office, one of the first acts that I mentioned was re-examining starting from the beginning. And I often tell people this, that law enforcement solves crimes really 2 ways, through witnesses and physical evidence. When we lack witnesses, we rely on physical evidence. You hear it in the news all the time about physical evidence that has linked somebody to a crime. Well, that's extremely important to solving a crime. In this case, we were dealing with a case that was, at my point of coming into office, about 14 years old, which makes it very difficult. Since that time, I believe there's a list somewhere, I can't see it, probably somewhere over here. Thank you. That is highlighting what I'm just about to tell you. Since I came in office in 2011, we have served over 41 search warrants on this case, done physical searches of 16 different locations, one of which was back on the back hill, you may remember a few years ago, a complete re-examination of every physical item seized, submission of 37 items of evidence from the early days of the case for modern DNA testing, recovery of 193 items of physical evidence, new physical evidence. We've conducted approximately 137 person-to-person interviews, and in addition, completed over 500 additional police reports. I can tell you this file, the size of it is probably in the size, if you put it on a hard drive, it's in excess of 3 terabytes. It's that much involved in this case. It's my hope that we're able to take the first step toward justice for the Smart family. Peace for the community, some justice out there for all of us, and most especially for Kristin. I have spoken to the Smart family numerous times, including this morning, matter of fact, twice today. I think they're feeling a bit of relief, but as you can imagine, until we return Kristin to them, this is not over, and we have committed to them that we are not going to stop until Kristin has been recovered, no matter what the cost, no matter what the time. We're committed to that, and I know they believe in us. I know they believe that we will find Kristin. So this afternoon, we have turned the case over to the San Luis Obispo District Attorney's Office. The way the process works, the warrants that were signed by the Superior Court allowed for the arrest and booking of Paul and his father, Ruben. Now the case has been handed to the District Attorney for review and their announcement of further proceedings. I'd like to thank my investigators. There was certainly the investigator that I introduced, Detective Cole, but there was Detective Commander that's in the audience, a new Detective Commander, many people over the years that have worked on this case. I think the people that are representing here today, myself, the Chief of Cal Poly Police, weren't part of this investigation, weren't part of this agency that we are all in when this happened. And I think the cooperation that's taken place, I know President Armstrong has really opened the door for us to do and provide us anything that he possibly can, including having this press conference here in Cal Poly today. So I'd like to introduce President Armstrong to say a few words.
Thank you, Sheriff Parkinson. I appreciate so many members of the Cal Poly and Central Coast communities, San Luis Obispo, being here today. Our Cal Poly and Central Coast communities have watched the case of Kristin Smart's disappearance closely and hope for justice for Kristin and resolution for the family for years. The news today of arrest in connection with the case brings sadness, but also a measure of relief and hope for resolution. While we know that today's developments do not represent the end of the case, it is a significant step. We at Cal Poly offer our thanks to Sheriff Ian Parkinson and his department, as well as District Attorney Dan Dow and his office, who have worked hard to find answers in this case for Kristin and her family. I know that many across California and the U.S. and many of you here today also thank Chris Lambert for his efforts as well. Last, our thoughts and prayers continue to be with Denise and Stan Smart, all of Kristin's family and friends as this process proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you, President Armstrong. I am prepared to answer any questions that you might have. Just understand, as I stated, that some of the items that I just will not be able to discuss.
Sheriff.
When will Paul be extradited to San Luis?
He was driven from San Pedro and booked into San Luis County Jail today already, so he's here.
Sheriff Parkinson, are you guys any closer to finding Kristin at this point? And the search warrants that are being served currently, reason to believe that she may be at Ruben Flores' home or any of the properties belonging to the Flores family?
Well, the first part of the question is, are we any closer? And the answer is yes, I believe we are. But only time will tell. So if obviously we recover, we'd be making that announcement today. In regards to the search warrants, you know, we're after all kinds of things, physical evidence again, anything that might lead us to the location of Kristin. And as you know from the previous search and as you reported from this search, we're out there with, you know, our ground penetrating radar again. So yes, it's safe to say we're checking everywhere possible.
Sheriff Parkinson, when might we see either Ruben or Paul or both in court?
I believe that Paul's arraignment will be on Thursday. It really depends on Ruben. Ruben has the ability to bail out. If he bails out, then he will not be there on Thursday. But if he is still in custody, he will too be in court on Thursday.
Thursday at the latest, then?
Yes. Yes. Yes, sir. Well, as I've said before, and this case is probably the best illustration of it, is that it's not what you believe, it's what you can prove. So when people ask, why is this taking so long? Because the general public knows this much about the case, and the case is this big. And so as it progresses, you know, and when I talk about that due process rights, we have a right, or we have a duty and obligation to protect people that are innocent as well as guilty. So we can't base arrest on what we might believe. It has to be based on physical evidence.
Hey, Sheriff, you mentioned that you can't talk a lot about some of the evidence, but can you talk in general about the physical evidence? And was any of the physical evidence that it belonged to Kristin Smart, you believe? And was any of that physical evidence found in one of the Flores' homes?
Let me see if I can answer it this way. Forensic physical evidence was located, and yes, we believe it's linked to Kristin. And yes, we did find physical evidence at least 2 homes.
And you also mentioned some information in the podcast. Can you expand on that a little bit?
In regards to what?